Good morning, Cochrane. Welcome to another edition of Fireside Chat with Mayor Jeff Genung. That is me, of course. We're sitting here in the Hall of Vision this spring day with no one sitting beside me. I usually have been trying to have a special guest on. My special guest this time is going to be some graphics over here, and also I have a special announcement at the very end of the video, so please stay tuned or skip to the end if that's what you'd like to do, and see what my virtual guest is going to be today. Without further ado, let's get right into the April 23rd council meeting. We had quite a few things on the agenda, but we got through them in a fairly efficient manner. A lot of deep discussions on some hugely important issues to Cochrane. So bylaws, we had 3. And there was 2 in particular that were dealing with Heartland. Heartland Stage 2 Area Structure Plan and a Land Use Bylaw Amendment. Essentially, these were being looked at to incorporate the new RCMP detachment site into Heartland and to change some zonings from, to shrink down the commercial zone that was there already to a smaller neighborhood commercial property, and then swap that over with where the original site for the RCMP detachment was going to be, and the request was to put some higher density R2 zoning for townhomes. So council was somewhat concerned with the amount of traffic. We did have a public hearing a couple weeks ago, and we heard from a couple of concerned residents about traffic and parking, etc., and also about the reduction of commercial space in the area. So a lot of the questions last night from council to administration were in regards to those topics, and then we heard back from administration that the site had been for sale and had been marketed for quite some time for the large commercial property I'm talking about, and there was no uptake in the market for that. So there was originally there was supposed to be a grocery store, but all of the grocery store chains that looked at locating there in Heartland decided that there was not enough residential there to sustain a grocery store long term. So all of the grocers that were approached have since pulled out. So yes, there was quite a bit of concern about just leaving this as a vacant piece of land, and this was to deal with that. So we were going to look at shrinking down the commercial and adding some R2 zoning. So council has deferred that decision to the next council meeting to allow administration to come back with a couple of amendments to that to show us what it would look like to put maybe some single family in there and reduce the density, which would address some of the parking concerns, and also talk a little further about the specifics on the commercial side. So those 2 bylaws were deferred to the next council meeting. I believe that's May 13th. So moving along, the next bylaw was land use amendment amendment to the land use bylaw for backlit signs. As long as I've been in Cochrane, I think I can remember hearing concerns, pro and cons about backlit signs and whether they should be allowed in Cochrane. Currently, they are prohibited in Cochrane. You cannot have a backlit sign. We do have a few of them that were grandfathered in from before they were prohibited, which was 2015 to date. There's been 2 or 3 that have kind of gotten through CPC. Anyways, this was about allowing backlit signs in our community again. So the planning department brought forward an amendment that would allow the backlit signs only in 5, I believe 5 of 11 business districts that we have in the community. I'm just looking at my notes from last night. I wrote this down. Yes, 5 of 11 districts would only be allowed in, not in the historic downtown. Some of the concerns we've heard was we don't want the community to look like Vegas or have all these shiny lights all over the place and be affecting our dark sky policies that we have. So council did vote in favor of allowing backlit signs. That was the ultimate outcome last night, and I just want to read a couple of the reasons why. The backlit signs are only being allowed in 5 of the 11 districts, of course, and I can't find it. I have a whole lot of notes on it, but they're restricted to certain areas of town. Like I said, not the historic downtown. Some highway commercial, yes. The downtown expansion area, so in the quarry, they would be allowed. Up in Riversong, where the car dealerships are, they would be allowed there. The one thing that I liked about what we did last night was, and the administration had put this in the bylaw, was that the signs would only be a maximum of 6,000 lumens, which we had a little research done on what a lumen really is, and 8,800 is where it becomes obtrusive and distracting. So 6,000 is much lower than that, so we're not going to be distracting drivers or attracting people's eyes away from things that they should be paying attention to. They're not going to be too bright, I guess is the point. Also, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., the lights will have to be dimmed by half. So at night, all of these backlit signs, whether they were, if they're allowed, will have to be dimmed. And all of the signs would have to go through the Cochrane Planning Commission. So every single backlit sign that is applied for has to go through the process of going to the Planning Commission because they're a discretionary use, not allowed just because. So you'll have to apply for a permit for the sign and then go through that body, and they will look at distance, number of signs on your property, the brightness of them, the location, and then make a decision on a per lot, per case basis. So we have a lot of safe clauses in there so that we don't end up with a town full of backlit signs, I guess is the ultimate. But they will be allowed in 5 of 11 districts. So that was that. I'm sorry I went through all my notes here, but we'll just keep moving on. The next thing was business on the agenda, and we had 3, and they were all really, like I said, deep topics. First one, council priorities. You may have heard me talk about council priorities in the past. At the beginning of our term, we set our strategic priorities where we had 4 pillars: community connectivity, community facilities, et cetera, et cetera. You can go and look at them online. So every year we revisit those to make sure we're on target, they're up to date, and we cross off things off the list that we have accomplished. So we had our proposed strategic priority update that we took out to the public, and we were at Spray Lakes Rec Center, and we engaged with the public. We got a lot of feedback. It feels like we're on the right track. People are agreeing that if we are to keep working on these priorities, that we are building a Cochrane that you want to live in. So that's good news. So we have to, basically we're staying fast with the plan, and the only updates really that we've made that are really interesting are we've kind of listed more projects on there. So pathways, for example, now the list of pathways that are going to be completed are included in our strategic priorities, so you can check those out online and get your update there. Next was water strategy. It's probably no surprise. We've talked about water for quite a few years now in Cochrane. With the changes to Alberta Environment, with the Water Act, and with the moratorium on drawing any more water out of the Bow River, Alberta Environment is not allowing any more licenses to be taken to draw water from the Bow. Cochrane's license, and this is a very complex issue that we've been working on for quite some time, like I said, but when I was on council in the past, I would say probably 2004 or 5, we were talking about our license only being good for a population of about 30,000 residents. Well, we haven't changed our license, and we've upgraded our water treatment plant a little bit in the meantime, but through water conservation and through different means of replacing leaky pipes and that type of infrastructure upgrades, we have been able to extend the number of residents of that same license to 40,000 residents. And now this is just a guesstimate based on the extreme climate that if we were to, so the numbers are based on we're having a super dry summer where people are irrigating lots and using lots of water. So it's based on the worst case scenario. And what the message I want to make really clear to people is that there will never be a time when you go to turn your tap on and no water would come out. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about future residents and our ability to grow past 40,000 residents. So we feel with the current growth rates of 3 to 4%, we have about 8 to 10 years of a population growth in that license. So we really need to start planning now about how we are going to increase our license or add more conservation efforts to allow for growth. And that growth doesn't always have to be residential. I know there's a lot of people that are upset with population explosion in Cochrane. Obviously the market has turned and our population is not growing as fast as it was, but we still would like to attract more tech businesses, maybe some industry to Cochrane so that we have more jobs and more tax base to offset taxes from the residents. But to do that, we're going to need water. So basically what this water strategy is, and Council approved it last night, and we're using funds through a reserve that we have collected through water fees to help pay for this. So we're going to look at, the administration in the water department is looking at all different ways to increase our license. So whether that would be buy a license, look at a pipeline to the city perhaps. Anyways, they're looking at all these options, maybe reservoir storage facilities, and they're building a strategy on how Cochrane can deal with its increase in water licensing. You may have heard other communities are dealing with this same issue. Okotoks, for example, our neighbors to the south, they have reached their capacity on their water license and they're trying to build a pipeline to the city of Calgary. So Alberta Environment has basically stopped them. There's some environmental concerns or some red tape that they're trying to get through with the provincial government, Alberta Environment in particular. So these types of discussions take years to get through. It's starting to affect some of the economy in Okotoks, and we do not want to be in that position. So that's why we've engaged our administration to start looking at a strategy on how we can deal with our water license. So that is what water strategy means. So no decisions have been made at this point. I mean, I talked about a pipeline. We're not saying we're going to build a pipeline. We're just looking at all of the options right now with water. So that is that. So last thing on the agenda, I'm super excited about this. This was something that I've been kind of dreaming of for a long time, and it is called Cochrane's Community Vision. And you may ask, why are we looking at this now? And I'm just going to hold up some paper copies here, but I'm going to you're going to see this, and it's a draft because we really want your opinion on whether or not you think this is hitting the mark for you as a Cochrane resident. So we're going to be doing a lot of public engagement about this. You can visit letstalkcochrane.ca/vision if you want to check it out online. We're going to go live with that today, I believe. So also we're going to be at the trade fair. You can look at some of the boards and talk to councillors and myself about exactly what this vision means. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about it today because I think it's such a big deal that we're going to have to do a special edition. I might take this out on the streets of Cochrane and interview a few people and really give it the attention that it deserves. But in a nutshell, we're looking at what does Cochrane look like in 30 to 50 years? And the reason that we're really doing this now, I mean, some people would say, why aren't you focusing on traffic? Why aren't you focusing on the other issues that Cochrane's faced with? And the answer to that is that we are. But in the meantime, if we don't deal with the pressures that we're dealing with on the outside of our boundaries, on our borders, we're going to be just left to be dealing with things as they happen to us. And I would rather see see us take some control back in our future and plan the Cochrane that we want to live in now and into the future. So if we don't start putting those pieces in place now, the legacy that we will leave behind will be one of "I wish we had" instead of "I'm so glad we did." And so that, in a nutshell, is what we're talking about. But it's a series of maps. It's a story that tells the fact that if we don't start sticking to these aspirations in Cochrane and start protecting what is important to us, then it will be continued to be allowed to erode away. So we're talking about green space, we're talking about how we'd like to grow and where, and also protecting our gateways into our community, which are, in my view, very important to protect. So Council is unanimous in this vision. We have spent the last few months crafting this together. It's based in a lot of documents that we've already done a whole lot of public engagement on, so it's not really going to be a shocker or a huge surprise to the public. But I think the way it's been presented and the way that the story tells itself is very compelling, and it will, I'm hoping that Cochrane residents find it as useful and needed, as useful and as, you know, it's going to be something that I think really leaves a legacy in Cochrane for years to come. So please stay tuned for a special edition of that, and I will get into it in more detail on the streets. So for now, that was the April 23rd Council meeting from Fireside Chat on the Love Seat here in the Hall of Vision. Thanks for joining. See you next time.